My wife is insisting our newborn take her deceased ex-husband's last name, so I filed for divorce and she refuses to accept it. 3 weeks after our son was born, she ordered me out of the house we bought together. The reason? She wanted our baby boy to carry her late ex's surname, not mine. Her ex passed 4 years ago. Severe PTSD from 2 tours in Afghanistan. She still has a 13-year-old son from that marriage living with us. I've been in his life since he was 7. The teenager already has his biological father's last name, and so does she. She never changed it when we married, which in hindsight was the first glaring warning sign I ignored. Now she's demanding our infant son take that same name. Her reasoning: if the baby has my surname, her older son will feel like an outsider in his own home, as though different last names automatically mean I love one child less. I tried every reasonable middle ground. I offered that since I've basically raised her teenager for 6 years. Homework, sports, doctor visits, the works. Maybe he could add or switch to my name so the whole family matches. She erupted, burst into tears, accused me of trying to wipe her late husband's existence from the earth, called me controlling and heartless. I then proposed we all take my surname as a unified fresh start. She shot it down instantly, said her son has carried his name his whole life and shouldn't be forced to change it just to make me feel included. Those were her exact words. The birth certificate filing was set for Thursday. By Tuesday, we'd barely exchanged 10 civil sentences in 6 days. The house felt like a mausoleum, yet she stayed barricaded in the bedroom with the baby. I slept on the living room sofa. Every attempt at talking ended with her sobbing or me walking out to avoid saying something irreversible. Then her 13-year-old pulled me aside one night while she was upstairs feeding. He looked anxious but resolute. "Dad," he whispered, "I don't care if our last names are different. You're my dad. He was my father, but you're the one who shows up every day." That sentence hit me like oxygen after holding my breath for weeks. I thought if I shared what he said, she might finally see reason. At dinner that evening, I brought it up gently, framing it as something positive the boy had volunteered. Her face drained of color, then flushed crimson. She exploded, screamed that I'd manipulated her son, brainwashed him against his real father's memory. I hadn't even finished the sentence before she hurled her water glass against the backsplash. Shards everywhere. Tuesday night, 48 hours before the registry appointment, she trapped me in the hallway, eyes glassy and frantic. She said if I forced our son to carry my name, she'd rather end her own life than live with the regret. She repeated the threat twice, voice shaking. I didn't know what else to do. I called the non-emergency line, explained she'd made explicit suicidal statements, mentioned possible postpartum issues, and said I was worried for her safety and the baby's. Officers arrived in under 20 minutes. She fought them verbally the entire time they escorted her out, kept insisting it was just said in the heat of the moment that she was fine, but they transported her for a mandatory 72-hour psychiatric hold anyway. Thursday morning, I went to the Vital Records office alone. I filled out every line myself. First name, middle name, last name, all mine. Zero trace of her ex anywhere on the document. Friday afternoon, her ex's parents used the spare key they still had from years of occasional babysitting and let themselves in. They marched straight to the nursery and tried to lift the baby carrier. Said my wife had texted her sister instructions to collect both boys until she was released. I blocked the doorway and told them to get out of my house. They threatened to call police. I said, "Please do. I'm the legal father with sole temporary custody right now. You have zero claim to my son." They backed off, but took her older son with them instead. Packed his backpack and Xbox while I stood there watching. That weekend, my in-laws showed up unannounced, insisting they needed to bring the baby to the hospital so my wife could see him. When I refused, they called me obstructive, said I was punishing a mother who was already suffering. I said no 17 times before they finally drove away. Monday, a Child Protective Services caseworker arrived with badge and paperwork. She toured the house, asked about feeding routines, examined the crib setup. Everything was in order. She noted I was the stable caregiver providing a safe environment. The report sided with me. My wife was discharged the following Tuesday. She didn't come home, went directly to her parents' place. She's been there 3 weeks now. She's tried twice to take the baby when my back was turned. Once while I was rolling the trash bins out, once while I was in the shower. I had the locks changed that same afternoon and installed a video doorbell. Now she sends pumped breast milk via her sister 3 times a day. Her sister knocks, sets the cooler bag on the porch, and leaves without a word. Divorce papers are filed and served. My attorney says primary physical custody is almost certain, given the documented threats, the hold, and the CPS assessment. Health and Family Services have already classified me as the fit parent. Her parents phoned yesterday evening, called me a monster for weaponizing the baby against their daughter, said I was heartless and vengeful. I told them their daughter chose a ghost over the living man standing in front of her, and she made that choice the moment she demanded a dead man's name on our son's birth certificate instead of the father who's raising him, and the line went dead silent. Then her mother said, "She'll never forgive you for any of this." I answered, "Good, neither will I." The silence that followed that phone call was heavier than any of the shouting matches. I sat at the kitchen table staring at the empty high chair we'd bought together back when we were still picking out shades of sage green for the nursery, back when I thought I was building a life with a woman, not a shrine to a dead man. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like her coming back with a key I didn't know she had. I checked the baby's monitor every 10 minutes. Seeing his chest rise and fall in that soft, rhythmic blue light was the only thing keeping my own heart beating. He has my nose, he has my eyes, and now, on a piece of paper filed in a cold government office, he has my name. The next morning, the sister showed up with the milk cooler. Usually she's gone before I can even unlock the deadbolt, but this time she was standing there, arms crossed, staring at the new Ring camera. "You're destroying her, Mark," she said, her voice flat. No greeting, no "how is the baby," just that. "She destroyed us," I replied, opening the door just wide enough to grab the bag. "The moment she made our son a tribute to a man who's been in the ground for 4 years. How do you think that works, Sarah? I change the diapers, I do the 3 a.m. feedings, I pay the mortgage, but the name on his ID belongs to the guy she still keeps a photo of on her nightstand? It's about family unity," Sarah hissed. "Leo already lost one father. Yeah, he doesn't need to feel like his brother is more of a son to you than he is. I have been Leo's father for 6 years. I taught him how to ride a bike. I was the one in the front row of his middle school play while your sister was too overwhelmed to leave the house because it was the anniversary of the deployment. I don't give a damn about the name, Sarah. I care about the fact that she's using our baby as a bandage for a wound she refuses to let heal." I shut the door. I didn't wait for her response. The legal battle started moving with a terrifying mechanical speed. My lawyer, a woman named Elena, who looked like she hadn't smiled since the 90s, sat me down in her office. The air smelled of old paper and expensive coffee. The psychiatrist psychiatric hold is our strongest lever, Elena said, tapping a pen against a manila folder. Combined with the threat of self-harm in front of the child. The courts don't take that lightly. But Mark, you have to be prepared. She's going to go for maternal bond. She's going to use the breastfeeding as a reason for full custody. She'll claim you're being vindictive because of the name dispute. It's not just a name dispute, I said, my voice cracking. It's a reality dispute. She's living in a world where her first husband is still the lead character. I'm just a supporting actor who's expected to pay the bills and keep the set running. Elena nodded slowly. I get it, but in a courtroom, we stick to the facts. Stability, safety, and the child's best interest. Keep the logs. Every time she tries to take a baby, every time a relative calls to harass you, do not engage, do not yell. Be the boring parent. Being the boring parent was the hardest thing I'd ever done. Every fiber of my being wanted to scream at the injustice of it. I missed Leo. God, I missed that kid. I'd spent 6 years being his rock, and now he was tucked away in his grandparents' house, likely being told that I was the villain who sent his mother to the hospital. I tried calling him. His grandmother answered and told me Leo didn't want to talk to me. I knew it was a lie, but what could I do? Force a 13-year-old onto a phone call? 3 days later, a package arrived. It wasn't served by a bailiff or a courier. It was a box of Leo's things, mostly clothes I'd bought him, his favorite hoodie, a pair of sneakers. On top was a note written in his messy teenage scrawl. I'm sorry, Dad. They won't let me come over. Mom cries every time I mention you. Take care of the baby. I told him his name is great. I sat on the floor of the hallway and cried for the first time since this whole nightmare started. The first mediation session was held over Zoom. Seeing her face on the screen was a jolt to my system. She looked thin, hollowed out. Her hair, usually so meticulously kept, was pulled back in a messy knot. She wouldn't look at the camera. She kept staring at something off screen, probably her lawyer's notes. The petitioner is requesting primary physical custody with supervised visitation for the mother, Elena began, her voice professional and cold. My wife's lawyer interrupted immediately. My client was suffering from a documented mental health crisis exacerbated by postpartum hormones. To strip a mother of her newborn over a disagreement about a surname is not only cruel, it's legally shaky. It wasn't a disagreement, I spoke up, ignoring Elena's warning look. You threatened to kill yourself, Qley, in the hallway, while I was holding our son. You told me you'd rather be dead than have him carry my name? Qley finally looked at the screen. Her eyes were red, brimming with a mix of fury and deep, agonizing sorrow. Because you were trying to erase Leo's heritage. You were trying to make him feel like he didn't belong. He belongs to us, I shouted. Not to a ghost, not to a man who died before he was even conceived. Why is his memory more important than my reality? Why do I have to compete with a dead man for the right to name my own flesh and blood? He was a hero, she whispered, the words coming out like a prayer. He was a man, Qley, and I'm the man who's here. I'm the one who stayed. The mediator called for a break. When we came back, the tone had shifted. Qley's lawyer mentioned a compromise, a hyphenated name. No, I said firmly. The birth certificate is filed. It's done. I'm not changing it. If she wants to be a mother to this child, she needs to accept that he is a part of this family, not an extension of her old one. The session ended with no resolution. Living in the house alone with the baby felt like being in a bunker. I went through the motions. Bottle, burp, change, nap, repeat. The mundane tasks were my only tether to sanity. I started noticing things I'd been blind to before. The way she'd kept her ex's old dog tags in a shadow box in the living room, right next to our wedding photos. And the way she'd insisted on a military-style nursery theme that I'd originally thought was just a tribute to her father, but now realized was another nod to him. The warning signs weren't just signs. They were a roadmap I'd chosen to ignore because I loved her. 2 weeks later, the doorbell rang at 9 p.m. I checked the camera. It was Leo. He was alone, standing on the porch in the rain, shivering. I opened the door instantly. He practically fell inside. I ran away, he panted, wiping rain from his forehead. Grandpa's asleep. She's just staring at the wall, Dad. She's not even eating. They're talking about taking you to court to get the baby and moving us to another state. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the wet air. They can't do that, Leo. I'm his father. They don't care, he said, his voice shaking. They say you're dangerous. But I told them you're the only one who actually listens. He looked toward the stairs. Can I see him? Just for a minute? I took him up to the nursery. We stood over the crib in silence. Leo reached out and let the baby's tiny hand wrap around his finger. He looks like you, Leo whispered. He really does. He has a bit of your chin, too, I said softly. Leo looked at me, tears welling up. I don't want to go back there. It feels like a funeral every day. Since the baby was born, it's like she's trying to bring him back through the baby. It's creepy, Dad. It's like she doesn't even see the baby for who he is. That was the core of it. The ghost wasn't just a name. It was an obsession that had turned our son into a vessel for a grief she refused to process. And I called my lawyer that night. Then I called the police to report that Leo was safe with me so they wouldn't file a kidnapping charge. The fallout was nuclear. Her parents arrived with a police escort an hour later. There was screaming on the lawn. Neighbors turned on their porch lights. Qley was there too, standing in the back looking like a ghost herself. Give us our grandson, her father bellowed. Leo is 13, I said, standing on the top step. He came here because he doesn't feel safe in a house where people are plotting to steal a child. He stays here until a judge says otherwise. The police talked to Leo inside. He was calm. He was clear. He told them he didn't want to go back to the house where everyone is sad all the time. Since there was no formal custody agreement for Leo yet, I'd never legally adopted him. The mistake I now felt in my marrow. They couldn't force him to stay with me, but they also couldn't force him to go if he was in fear for his well-being. It was a gray area, and for the first time, the gray worked in my favor. Eventually, they left. But the look Qley gave me as she walked away, it wasn't anger. It was a cold, dead vacuum. A month later, the court date arrived. The judge was an older man with a reputation for being old school. I was terrified. Qley took the stand first. She played the part perfectly. Soft-spoken, grieving, the victim of a controlling husband who'd used her moment of weakness to steal her son's identity. Then it was my turn. I didn't talk about the name at first. I talked about the 3 a.m.s. I talked about the hospital bill I paid. And I talked about the way Leo's grades had improved since I started tutoring him. And then I looked at the judge and said, Your Honor, a name is the first gift a father gives his son. It's a promise. It says, you belong to me and I will protect you. My wife didn't want to give our son a gift. She wanted to give her late husband a replacement. I couldn't let my son grow up in the shadow of a man he never knew. Being told his only purpose was to fill a hole in his mother's heart. The judge looked at the photos I'd submitted. The ones of the shadow box, the photos of the military nursery, the text messages where she called me a placeholder. The ruling wasn't a total victory, but it was enough. We have joint legal custody, but I have primary physical custody for the first year. A contingent on Qley completing a rigorous course of grief counseling and postpartum therapy. She gets supervised visits 3 times a week. Leo is living with me. His grandparents tried to fight it, but Leo told the court-appointed advocate that if they forced him back, he'd just keep running away until he turned 18. Yesterday was Qley's first supervised visit at a local center. I had to drop the baby off. She was waiting in a small, sterile room with plastic toys and a linoleum floor. I handed her the diaper bag. Our eyes met. "I still hate you," she whispered, so low the supervisor couldn't hear. "I know," I said. "But look at him, Qley. Really look at him." She looked down at the baby. He was wearing a little onesie that said, "Daddy's little hero." I hadn't picked it out to be spiteful. Leo had bought it for him. She started to cry. Not the hysterical, screaming cry from the hallway, but something quieter. Something that actually looked like real pain. I walked out of the room and sat in my car. I looked at the registration in my glove box. My last name. His last name. It cost me my marriage. It cost me my peace of mind. It cost me thousands of dollars and the respect of people I once called family. But when I go home tonight, I'll be greeted by a teenager who calls me Dad, and a baby who will never have to wonder if he was enough to satisfy a ghost. I'm rebuilding a life in the ruins of the one I thought I had. It's quiet. It's lonely sometimes. But when the house is still and the baby is sleeping, I don't feel like a supporting actor anymore. I'm the lead in my own life, and for the first time in years, and the air in the house finally feels like it belongs to the living. The first supervised visit was scheduled for a rainy Tuesday at a family access center. The building looked like an old elementary school. Brown bricks, heavy steel doors, and that distinct smell of floor wax and industrial cleaner. I sat in the parking lot for 15 minutes, the engine idling, watching the wipers sweep away the gray afternoon. My son was asleep in the back, tucked into his car seat, completely unaware that his world was currently a series of legal checkboxes. The supervisor, a woman named Mrs. Gable with a kind face and a clipboard that never left her side, met me at the door. "You're doing the right thing, Mark," she said softly as I unbuckled the carrier. "Transitions are hard, but consistency is what he needs." I didn't feel like I was doing the right thing. I felt like I was handing my heart over to someone who had already tried to break it. Qley was already in room 4. It was a small space filled with donated toys, plastic kitchens with missing doors, a bin of mismatched blocks, and a rug with a faded map of a city. She looked smaller than she had in court. Her skin was sallow, and she was wearing a thick, oversized sweater that seemed to swallow her whole. As I walked in, she stood up, her hands trembling. I didn't say a word. I just set the carrier on the floor and stepped back toward the door where Mrs. Gable stood. Qley knelt down. She didn't reach for him immediately. She just stared at him. "He's bigger," she whispered. Her voice was like dry paper. "He's already bigger. It's been a month." "Hi, Qley," I said. My voice felt loud in the small room. She reached out a finger and stroked his cheek. He stirred, blinking his eyes open, those blue eyes that looked exactly like mine, and for a second, a flicker of something human crossed her face. Not the anger, not the obsession, just a mother looking at her baby. "I brought his favorite blanket," she said, reaching into a bag. It was the one with the little embroidered anchors, the one her ex-husband's mother had bought. "He uses the one Leo picked out now," I said, perhaps more sharply than I intended. "The cotton one. He gets too hot in the wool." She flinched as if I'd struck her. "Right, of course. You're the expert now. I'm the one who knows what he needs at 2 a.m., I replied. I saw Mrs. Gable make a small note on her clipboard. I knew I should stop. But the bitterness was a physical weight in my throat. "He's healthy. He's sleeping through the night. He has a routine." Qley picked him up then. She held him against her chest, burying her face in his neck. She was shaking, and I could hear her drawing in jagged, sobbing breaths. "I just wanted us to be a family," she choked out. "I just wanted Leo to have a brother who felt like he belonged." "Leo belongs with me, Qley. He's at home right now doing his algebra homework. He asked if I'd take him to buy new cleats after this. He's moving forward. Why can't you?" She didn't answer. She just rocked the baby, whispering a name I couldn't hear. I hoped it was the one I gave him, but I knew in my gut it wasn't. That evening, after the baby was down and the house was quiet, Leo was sitting at the kitchen island. He'd been quiet since I got home. He'd barely touched his pasta. "How was she?" he asked, staring at a smudge on the granite. "Tired," I said. "Sad." But she held him the whole time. Leo looked up at me. "Do you think she'll ever come home, Dad?" I sighed, leaning against the counter. This was the question I'd been dreading. "I don't think so, Leo. Not to this house. Too much has happened. The trust is gone." "Is it my fault?" he asked, his voice small. "Because I told you what she said? Because I came here?" I walked over and put a hand on his shoulder. "Leo, look at me. None of this is on you. You were the only one being honest in a house full of secrets. Your mom, she's sick in a way that's hard to see. She's trying to live in 2 different times at once. You can't build a future when you're constantly trying to rewrite the past." Leo nodded slowly. "Grandpa says you're erasing my dad. He says the baby's name is an insult. Your father was a man who served his country, Leo. He'll always be your father. But he's not the baby's father. I am. And my son deserves to have his own identity, not a borrowed one. Does it feel like an insult to you?" Leo shook his head. "No, it feels like we're starting something new. It's just us 3 now, right? Just us 3, I promised. "So, about those cleats?" he asked, a small, genuine smile finally breaking through. "The season starts in 2 weeks. I need to break them in. Get your shoes on," I said, grabbing my keys. "We're going." As we walked out to the car, I looked back at the house. The lights were on in the nursery, casting a soft, warm glow onto the driveway. It wasn't the life I'd planned. It wasn't the perfect family I thought I was buying into when I proposed. But as Leo hopped into the passenger seat and started messing with the radio, I realized it was a real life. No ghosts, no shadows. Just a father, a son, and a baby waiting for us at home. The first supervised visit was scheduled for a rainy Tuesday at a family access center. The building looked like an old elementary school. Brown bricks, heavy steel doors, and that distinct smell of floor wax and industrial cleaner. I sat in the parking lot for 15 minutes, the engine idling, watching the wipers sweep away the gray afternoon. My son was asleep in the back, tucked into his car seat, completely unaware that his world was currently a series of legal checkboxes. The supervisor, and a woman named Mrs. Gable with a kind face and a clipboard that never left her side, met me at the door. "You're doing the right thing, Mark," she said softly as I unbuckled the carrier. "Transitions are hard, but consistency is what he needs." I didn't feel like I was doing the right thing. I felt like I was handing my heart over to someone who had already tried to break it. Qley was already in room 4. It was a small space filled with donated toys, plastic kitchens with missing doors, a bin of mismatched blocks, and a rug with a faded map of a city. She looked smaller than she had in court. Her skin was sallow, and she was wearing a thick, oversized sweater that seemed to swallow her whole. As I walked in, she stood up, her hands trembling. I didn't say a word, and I just set the carrier on the floor and stepped back toward the door where Mrs. Gable stood. Qley knelt down. She didn't reach for him immediately. She just stared at him. "He's bigger," she whispered. Her voice was like dry paper. "He's already bigger. It's been a month, Qley," I said. My voice felt loud in the small room. She reached out a finger and stroked his cheek. He stirred, blinking his eyes open, those blue eyes eyes that looked exactly like mine, and for a second, a flicker of something human crossed her face. Not the anger, not the obsession, just a mother looking at her baby. I brought his favorite blanket, she said, reaching into a bag. It was the one with the little embroidered anchors, the one her ex-husband's mother had bought. He uses the one Leo picked out now, I said, perhaps more sharply than I intended. Oh, the cotton one. He gets too hot in the wool. She flinched as if I'd struck her. Right, of course, you're the expert now. I'm the one who knows what he needs at 2 a.m., I replied. I saw Mrs. Gable make a small note on her clipboard. I knew I should stop, but the bitterness was a physical weight in my throat. He's healthy. He's sleeping through the night. He has a routine. Qley picked him up then. She held him against her chest, burying her face in his neck. She was shaking, and I could hear her drawing in jagged, sobbing breaths. I just wanted us to be a family, she choked out. I just wanted Leo to have a brother who felt like he belonged. Leo belongs with me, Qley. He's at home right now doing his algebra homework. He asked if I'd take him to buy new cleats after this. He's moving forward. Why can't you? She didn't answer. She just rocked the baby, whispering a name I couldn't hear. I hoped it was the one I gave him, but I knew in my gut it wasn't. That evening, after the baby was down and the house was quiet, Leo was sitting at the kitchen island. He'd been quiet since I got home. He'd barely touched his pasta. How was she? He asked, staring at a smudge on the granite. Tired, I said. Sad, but she held him the whole time. Leo looked up at me. Do you think she'll ever come home, Dad? I sighed, leaning against the counter. This was the question I'd been dreading. I don't think so, Leo. Not to this house. Too much has happened. The trust is gone. Is it my fault? He asked, his voice small. Because I told you what she said? Because I came here? I walked over and put a hand on his shoulder. Leo, oh, look at me. None of this is on you. You were the only one being honest in a house full of secrets. Your mom, she's sick in a way that's hard to see. She's trying to live in 2 different times at once. You can't build a future when you're constantly trying to rewrite the past. Leo nodded slowly. Grandpa says you're erasing my dad. He says the baby's name is an insult. Your father was a man who served his country, Leo. He'll always be your father, but he's not the baby's father. I am. And my son deserves to have his own identity, not a borrowed one. Does it feel like an insult to you? Leo shook his head. No, it feels like we're starting something new. It's just us 3 now, right? Just us 3, I promised. So about those cleats? He asked, a small, genuine smile finally breaking through. The season starts in 2 weeks. I need to break them in. Get your shoes on, I said, grabbing my keys. We're going. As we walked out to the car, I looked back at the house. The lights were on in the nursery, casting a soft, warm glow onto the driveway. It wasn't the life I'd planned. It wasn't the perfect family I thought I was buying into when I proposed. But as Leo hopped into the passenger seat and started messing with the radio, I realized it was a real life. No ghosts, no shadows, just a father, a son, and a baby waiting for us at home. The milestone came on a Tuesday evening, 6 months to the day after the world had fractured. I was in the kitchen, trying to stir a pot of pasta while keeping one eye on the baby, who was currently doing his best impression of a turtle on a playmat in the center of the room. Leo was sitting at the counter, buried in a history textbook, his brow furrowed in that way that always reminded me of how much he cared about getting things right. Dad, look! Leo suddenly dropped his pen. It clattered against the granite. I turned just in time to see the baby push his chest off the floor, his little arms shaking with the effort. He let out a determined, frustrated grunt, a sound I'd come to recognize as his war cry. Then, with a clumsy, heavy lurch, he dragged his knee forward, and then the other. He wasn't just squirming anymore, he was moving. He's doing it! He's actually crawling! Leo scrambled off the stool, sliding onto the hardwood floor a few feet away from his brother. Come on, little man, right here, come to Leo! The baby stopped, looked up at Leo, and let out a drooly, toothless grin. He wobbled. It nearly tipped over, but found his balance and took 3 more shaky steps on his hands and knees toward his big brother. I stood there, wooden spoon still in hand, feeling a lump the size of a golf ball form in my throat. It was such a small thing in the grand scheme of life, a few inches of movement across a kitchen floor, but after the months of legal filings, silent hallways, and the crushing weight of the ghost, it felt like a victory march. Leo scooped him up the second he reached his target, hoisting him into the air like a trophy. Did you see that, Dad? He's a pro. He's gonna be a track star, or a linebacker. I saw it, Leo, I said, my voice thick. I saw it. I took a photo, not for social media, not to prove anything to the court, but just for the fridge. A photo of my 2 boys on the floor, the one grinning and the other looking prouder than if he'd just won the lottery. We should celebrate, Leo said, setting the baby back down gently. Real milestones need real celebrations. Can we do the thing? The pancake thing? The pancake thing was something we'd started doing on Saturday mornings to reclaim the kitchen from the memories of tense, silent breakfasts. Chocolate chips, whipped cream, and way too much syrup. It's 6:30 p.m. on a school night, Leo, I said, looking at the boiling pasta. Leo gave me a look, the one that knew exactly how to play me. He only crawls for the first time once, Dad. It's a historical event. I turned off the burner. Fine, get the flour. But if you're too sugar-crashed to finish that history chapter, that's on you. As we worked together, and the kitchen filled with the smell of sizzling butter and the sound of Leo narrating the great crawl of 2026 to the baby, who was now sitting up, watching us with wide, curious eyes. For a moment, I thought about Qley. I wondered if I should text her. He crawled today. I knew she'd want to know, but I also knew the storm it would kick up. She'd ask why she wasn't there. She'd blame the supervised visits. She'd turn this pure, simple moment into another battleground for her grief. I looked at Leo, who was currently trying to flip a pancake in the shape of a B for his brother's name, my name, our name. Dad? Leo asked, noticing my silence. You okay? Yeah, I said, reaching for the syrup. I'm great, better than great. We ate pancakes for dinner. The baby got a tiny mashed up bit of banana, in which he promptly smeared into his hair, much to Leo's delight. There was no shadow in the room, no photos of the past looming over the table, just a mess of the present and the promise of more firsts to come. When I finally tucked Leo in later that night, he looked up at me from under his duvet. He's gonna be okay, right? He's not gonna grow up sad? I leaned against the doorframe, the same place I'd stood dozens of times when this house felt like a prison. He's got you for a brother, Leo, and he's got me. He's going to be more than okay. He's going to be loved for exactly who he is. Leo nodded, satisfied, and closed his eyes. I walked down the hall to the nursery. The baby was out cold, his little bottom in the air, snoring softly. I adjusted his blanket, the cotton one Leo bought, and stood there in the dark for a long time. He didn't need to be a hero. He didn't need to be a tribute. He just needed to be a boy who knew how to move forward, one shaky step at a time. And as I watched him sleep, I realized that I was finally doing the same. The final divorce hearing was held on a Tuesday in late October. The air outside the courthouse was crisp, smelling of damp leaves and the coming winter, a sharp contrast to the suffocating, humid heat of the day this nightmare had begun. I sat at the petitioner's table, my hands folded on top of a legal pad. I didn't look back when I heard the heavy oak doors creak open. open. I didn't need to. I knew the scent of her perfume, though it was fainter now, replaced by something sharper, more medicinal. Qley took her seat next to her lawyer. The silence between us a canyon that no bridge could ever span. Judge Miller didn't waste time. He was a man who had seen 1,000 families break apart in this room, his face etched with the weary lines of a man who had heard every excuse in the book. He flipped through the thick stack of reports, the psychiatric evaluations, the supervised visit logs, the CPS findings. Mrs. Miller, the judge began, looking over his spectacles at Qley. I've reviewed the progress reports from your therapy sessions. Your counselor notes that you have begun to acknowledge the impact of complicated grief on your decision-making. That is a start. Qley nodded, her voice barely a whisper. Yes, Your Honor. However, Miller continued, his voice hardening, this court's primary concern is the stability and psychological well-being of the child. The evidence shows that the petitioner has provided a consistent, safe, and nurturing environment. The older child, Leo, has also expressed a clear and sustained desire to remain in the petitioner's home. I felt a slight tremor in my chest. This was it. The moment where the law would finally draw the line between the living and the dead. The court finds that it is in the best interest of the infant that primary physical custody remains with the father, the judge declared. The sound of his gavel was like a gunshot in the quiet room. The mother will have scheduled visitation, transitioning from supervised to unsupervised over the next 6 months, provided she continues her treatment plan. Then came the part that had started it all. The name. Qley's lawyer stood up. Your Honor, regarding the birth certificate, my client still feels strongly that the hyphenation would provide a sense of familial continuity for her older son. The birth certificate stands as filed, Judge Miller interrupted, not even looking up from his notes. The name on that document represents the legal and biological father. To alter it now, given the history of this case, would be to prioritize a symbolic gesture over the reality of the child's life. Mr. Miller has proven himself to be the stable parent. The name remains. I let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding for half a year. It was over. The state had validated the truth. I wasn't a placeholder. I wasn't a temporary fix for a broken heart. I was the father. As we walked out of the courtroom, Qley stopped me in the hallway. Her parents were standing a few feet away, looking at me with a hatred so pure it was almost impressive, but Qley just looked tired. You won, she said. Nobody won, Qley, I replied, looking her in the eye. We lost a family, but I saved my son from becoming a ghost before he even learned to walk. I hope the therapy helps, truly, because he deserves a mother who sees him, not just a way to bring back what she lost. She didn't say anything. She just turned and walked toward her parents, a shadow blending into the shadows of the hallway. I walked out into the sunlight. Leo was waiting in the car, leaning against the door with his headphones around his neck. He looked up as I approached, his face guarded, waiting for the verdict. We're going home, Leo, I said, tossing my keys to him so he could unlock the doors. For good. Oh, and your brother is staying right where he belongs. Leo didn't cheer. He just nodded, a look of profound relief washing over his face. Cool, he muttered, though I saw him wipe his eyes as he climbed into the passenger seat. Can we stop for pizza? The good kind? The good kind, I agreed. As I drove away from the courthouse, I looked in the rearview mirror. My son was in the back, sleeping in his car seat, his tiny hand curled into a fist. On the seat next to him was a folder containing the final decree. The house would be quiet tonight. There would be no more lawyers to call, no more threats to document, no more competing with a man who wasn't there. It was just us, the Millers, a real messy, living family, finally free of the dead. I reached over and turned up the radio, the sound of the music filling the car as we headed toward the house that was finally, truly, our home.